Hello there, in today's video we're going to talk about what it takes to be a pro photographer. Whether you're just looking to make a little bit of money on the side, or you're considering it as a career, or if you're right there ready to make the leap, ready to chase your dreams and do it full time, then this is the video for you. Let's go. Very appropriately for today, this video is also sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a domain name, a website, or an online store, then make your next move with Squarespace. About 3 years ago, I made a video called 10 Steps to Becoming a Full-Time Photographer. Now, I worded the title of that video very carefully because it was at that point that I had just become a full-time photographer. So I included that word becoming because at that point in time, I had literally no idea whether I was going to be able to make it work over the long term. They say the vast majority of businesses fail within the first 3 years, and I'm just coming up to that point where I've been a full-time pro for 3 years. Now, I wanted to make this video to complement that other one, and this one is going to be really 7 essentials to being a full-time photographer. Like in the first one though, this video has 0 tips about how to take good pictures. That's not what this is about. I have got loads of other videos on that, or you can subscribe to the Raw Room and learn it there. But if we're going to assume that if you have the guts to try and make some money from this, that you are capable of taking a good picture. I'm saying the word good on purpose too, because it doesn't have to be great. Yes, it helps, but there are millions of great pictures out there these days. People with a smartphone who are in the right place at the right time and they just absolutely nail it. Taking great pictures is absolutely not the key to being a successful pro photographer, but we are going to assume consistently good. Now, this is not a definitive list. There are lots of different ways that you can be successful, but this is just my story. I also don't want you to assume that I've got this all figured out, because I absolutely don't. It's exactly like my photography. I'm always learning. I'm always making mistakes and trying new things and pushing forward to trying to be the best that I can be. Being able to adapt is essential in any part of our lives, but as professional photographers or owners of small businesses, we're fortunate because we are small and streamlined. It means we can adapt very quickly, make decisions without delay, and move on opportunities immediately. Bigger companies or more established photographers can't do this because they get bogged down in the bureaucracy. They become slow or stuck in their ways. And we can take advantage of this by being nimble and decisive. Before I went full-time 3 years ago, I was a police officer for 14 years, most of it in London, where I was making life and death decisions almost on a daily basis, often in crazy situations. So it was essential to adapt quickly and sometimes even literally to survive. This experience has served me well and was absolutely critical when I was literally hours away from my photography business collapsing entirely. When I left the police, I'd built up enough money to last me for a year. Now, the amount you need is going to be different for everybody, but I've got 2 kids, so it immediately makes it more expensive, and the pressure is great when you've got people depending on you. I'd planned my first year absolutely perfectly. I was going to be out doing landscape photography all the time, developing my craft, selling prints, running workshops, winning corporate gigs. My YouTube channel was going to blow up and I was going to produce my first online course. Now, actually, a lot of that happened to some extent, but just not to the level that I needed. For example, I would win a corporate gig. I would then get really excited about doing it because it was 4 figures. I'd then get excited about delivering it, but then I'd have this anxiety that the client wasn't going to like it. Then they would like it and I'd get paid, and then I would realize that there was nothing else in the pipeline. The cash flow was really inconsistent and it caused me quite a bit of stress. I then went into production on my landscape photography masterclass. It was a huge project that required a lot of investment, but I was convinced it was going to be life-changing. Months later, I was then left with this 7-hour course, which I'm still extremely proud of. But if we look at the cost of producing it and we count my time in that as well, it probably cost around £15,000 to £20,000 to produce. It had to work. A couple of months after releasing it, I then met with my accountant to discuss some of the numbers and the sales figures of the masterclass. I then felt great when he confirmed to me that this was life-changing. I was riding high and feeling good. Then a couple more months went by and the sales figures took literally a nosedive off a cliff. I think part of the problem was that it's quite difficult to market the same thing over and over again, particularly to my audience. There are other marketing methods I was using, but these cost time and money. And one of the downsides of being small is that you don't have much of either of these things. Then over the next few months, for whatever reason, things started to dry up. And part of it was that I was still producing YouTube videos that take 3 or 4 days to make, and at the time were costing me more to produce than they were earning back in revenue. It got so bad that one Monday morning, I came to the realization that I had nothing left. I literally started then applying for jobs. I was looking at things like a video editor because it's something I could do and it paid just enough to sustain my family. I was then also faced with this sad reality that I was a failed photographer and a failed business owner. I was feeling very low and very down. Thankfully though, I have some great friends, one of whom owns their own business as well. And he helped me realize that I have assets and assets can be put to work. And in this case, we were talking about the masterclass and my slightly above average computer skills. So being small and agile, I adapted very quickly. And after 5 days of doing 16 to 18 hours a day, the Raw Room was born. I had planned to do a subscription platform for online photography learning, but I was forced to step my plans up. The Landscape Photography Masterclass sat at the center of the Raw Room, which people could now access for £5.99 a month. The Raw Room has grown since then, and you can now get a 7-day free trial, which includes the masterclass and lots more. But by adapting quickly and not giving up and working hard, I was able to literally save my business within just those few days. Now, you might have heard the phrase diversify or die, and that absolutely applies to professional photographers. It's not totally straightforward though, because to be a successful photographer, particularly in the commercial world, people will expect you to be a specialist in one area. What we're really talking about though is diversifying your business activities outside of your core photography. If you don't do this either, you leave yourself extremely vulnerable to external forces. Now, we've seen this with the pandemic, where literally overnight, photographers all over the world have had their businesses decimated. In March, when the pandemic really started to affect Europe, I had about 3 or 4 commercial jobs in the pipeline, and they just disappeared overnight. And I just had to watch this £10,000 to £15,000 just sort of walk out the door. It was actually quite scary. And then since then, nothing really new has entered the pipeline either, although it's been a little bit better over the last month or so. I've managed to survive thanks to building up this online presence, which just seems to be so much more robust than any of the other activities. My business model is also to always cast the net as wide as possible and then see what sticks. Experiment, make mistakes, learn, and adapt. As you start to spread your wings though, this might be the point where you start to run into the passive-aggressive behavior of people who are threatened by you. They will belittle you and put you down, and it's likely just because they are jealous. I saw someone talking like this about Peter McKinnon the other day, and it's just sad, and I feel bad for these people. It's a sort of sweet poison that people are serving you when they talk like this, and if you listen to it too often, you will become bitter and twisted by it. Right, we're going to talk about pricing yourself correctly in a minute, but before we do, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Now, if you have any hope of becoming a professional photographer or making some money from photography, then you are going to need a website. And Squarespace is just the perfect place for photographers because, like I said, we're small and independent. And with Squarespace, it's really, really easy to make a website from scratch quickly and with very little technical knowledge. You can easily upload your work, type a few bits in there, and have this beautiful website unique to you with your images, and you can put yourself out into the world. It's a great place to show your images better than on social media. And then as you grow, you can turn it into an online store, start selling prints, advertise your services. And yeah, it's just been great for me. And it's always been a pleasure to use with great customer service as well. So go to squarespace.com to start your free trial today, put your website together, and then if you like what you've produced, use the offer code FIRSTMAN to get 10% off your first purchase. Over the last few years, pricing myself correctly has undoubtedly been one of the hardest things that I have had to learn. Coming from a public sector job, it just felt very foreign to me trying to figure out actually how much I was worth. You want to try and strike that perfect balance between getting the work into the pipeline but for the maximum amount of money. There's several ways that you can price yourself up. You can look at an hourly rate, a daily rate, a per picture rate, or a per project rate. I use a sort of combination of all of these depending on the job and depending on the client. I would caution you against a per project rate though, because if you agree to this, it can very quickly, the project can start expanding much further beyond what you originally agreed. Per project can work well though for things like weddings or family shoots, basically anything where you're dealing with an individual consumer. When I decided to offer one-to-one landscape workshops, I decided that I didn't want it to be prohibitively expensive because I want people to feel like they're getting a lot of value from the day. So I settled on £350 for the day, which is usually about 8 hours, but sometimes a bit longer. I still though thought this seemed like quite a lot until I spoke to my dad about it, and he sort of pointed out that it's about £40 an hour, which is about the same rate that a car mechanic or a hairdresser would charge. Now, completely no disrespect to those people, but it's just simply isn't enough to sustain a professional photography business because of the sporadic nature of workshops and the travel involved. I still went ahead with £350, but I make up for this by retaining the right to film a vlog to maximize my time. I think a lot of clients like seeing that as well. When you're pricing yourself, it's also really important to not be taken advantage of because you need to earn enough money to get by. It is also very tempting to always offer to do things for free in order to win new clients. We need to be careful of this because we risk a couple of things. We risk just devaluing the service overall, but more importantly, you risk devaluing yourself because people become addicted to free, and you don't want to be known as the photographer who does things for free. Thankfully though, there is a better way to do this. Earlier this year, an opportunity came along to work with a very well-known organization, and I was really excited, really keen to do it, but it was clear from the outset that the budget was not quite right. It was nowhere near what I would normally charge, but I saw it as an opportunity that might lead to better things. So I wanted to meet that budget. Now the key here is perception. So what I did was price up the job exactly like I normally would have done, into the sort of mid 4 figures, but then I whacked on an 80% discount. Now this has it works in a couple of ways because you're showing what your value is normally, you're then meeting the budget, and the client then also feels like they're getting a really good deal. It's then down to you to do the best possible job you can, so then next time they pay full price. And you also then come away with a little bit of money that covers your expenses with a little bit left over. Unfortunately, there is no easy answer when it comes to pricing yourself, but I would just really encourage you not to undervalue yourself because you've got to eat. And then with time and experience, it will become much easier. This leads me nicely on to the next point, because by using that discount method, I have now built up a new solid relationship. And if you think relationships don't matter or are not important and you can do it alone, then you might as well give up now. I think we could talk about this point all day, but it's important to understand your own intentions. If you want to work with someone, it's important to consider, what are you bringing to the table? What value are you going to offer them? Why should they give up their precious time and money on you? My method when working with anyone, or just meeting people generally, is first to just try and be a nice guy, be a guy that's good to be around and good to talk to and that you actually want to spend time with. I just try to be a positive force and deliver work that makes an impact and helps the client achieve their goals. When I look back, I just want to see people in my wake who enjoyed working with me, who trust me, who like me, and look forward to working with me again. I literally have no interest in lying, cheating, or succeeding alone, and I'm always willing to leave money on the table to preserve this, even when I have none. There will be times though when people disappoint you, screw you around, or let you down. Now this happened to me very recently and it's extremely frustrating, but it's important not to let that disappointment derail you for too long, and take comfort in the knowledge that by not working with you, it's their loss. Over the years of being a cop, it became very clear to me that many people fundamentally don't understand risk. We should not be living in a way that we avoid all risk. Not only is it impossible, but it will also lead to us leading very boring lives. Cops on the street operate on the basis that there are two types of risk. There is known risk and there is unknown risk. Crossing the road is a good example of a known risk. There's a very real chance that you can be hit by a 2-ton box of metal and killed. But we understand this risk, we account for it, and most of the time make it across safely to the other side. An example of an unknown risk is like going out on an adventure where we don't really have any idea how things are going to go, but there will be certain known risks that we can account for along the way. Things like cold weather, starvation, communication difficulties, and diseases. Accepting these unknown risks is the key to running a business as well, because if you risk nothing, you will get nothing in return. Going from the ultra stable job of being a cop to being a professional photographer was a big risk for me and for my family. It wasn't a fool's errand though. I'd planned for many known risks, I'd prepared, and I was willing to put the hard work in to make it succeed, so I took the risk. Just to talk about COVID again for a second, although the pandemic has caught us completely off guard, this was still a known risk to business. And the risk is total collapse of the economy. We saw it happen in 2008, and we've seen it happen again in 2020, and at some point in the future, it will happen again. So if you allow your business to develop into the point where there's only one revenue stream, then you're leaving yourself vulnerable. It's much better to try and diversify when the times are good, because then you are managing that risk and preparing. If you try and diversify once the shit has hit the fan and make it work, then it may already be too late. Video. Now, I don't want to labour this point because it featured also in that previous video, but I think that all pro photographers should at least be considering doing some form of video, at least those who are more than 5 to 10 years away from retirement. We've seen the rise of AI software over the last few years, and it is not going to stop. There is now a very real risk that the profession of photography will disappear altogether. I'm not in any way saying that it will, but it is a risk. What will never disappear though is the art of storytelling. If you're a super successful photographer and you think you don't have time for video, then employ somebody to do it for you. Make it part of your business. Get them to follow you around or just be doing it. It doesn't necessarily have to be you on camera either. Also, if you start a YouTube channel, just be prepared for people to tell you that you are not a proper photographer if you're also a YouTuber. Now, these people make me laugh and I pity them because from a business point of view, you want to go where the attention is, and there's a lot of it on YouTube. But from my own personal point of view, I just like telling stories and sharing my experience with you. And if that automatically makes me a shit photographer, then I'm cool with that. One thing I find rarely gets talked about is control, and you do need to figure out how much control you want to have, and that might even guide you into the area of photography that you shoot. For example, with commercial photography, you're working business to business, which means it can be very lucrative, but as a consequence of that, it means that you will have less control. The client will set a brief. They will more than likely tell you what to shoot, where to shoot, and when to shoot it. And that can really put a limit on your control, but also on your creativity. You may also find that after doing this for a while, it's potentially going to just be less fulfilling. Some commercial clients can also be very annoying. It can happen so often, especially if you're dealing with a marketing person, where you submit a body of work that you've created and they ask for a change that just makes it a little bit worse than it was before. Now, I always make the change because they're the client and they are paying me for it. And I just take solace in the fact that this person really just wants to exert their creative influence on the project, even though they've got absolutely no idea what they're talking about. It's why I love landscape photography, which I would include as fine art photography, where you can have total freedom to make what you want, when you want, and where you want it. And it gives you that total creative control from start to finish. It's also then really nice when people look at your work and buy a print, and it just leaves that deep satisfaction that you've created something special. It really just comes down to self-awareness and understanding what you want. I like a mixture of the proactive and the reactive. The proactive and going out and doing landscape photography all off my own back, but then also reacting to the needs of a commercial client. I just like the balance. Going direct to the consumer is another option with things like family portraits, pet work, wedding photography, that kind of thing, because the client's unlikely to have as much knowledge about photography and how everything works. So it might give you a bit more creative control and it might give you a nice mix. Now, there's lots more to this. I could talk about it all day, but it is really important to be kind to yourself. When you're running your own business, it's tempting to just work all hours under the sun, but you've got to look after yourself, get your exercise in, get your sleep in, and get your downtime in as well to make it all worthwhile. We've also not covered sales, marketing, and branding and social media, all important things, but a video for another day, I think. Running your own photography business is a dream come true though, and it offers a huge amount of flexibility. It's a little bit like having another child though. This thing that you love and cherish, but spend all of your time worrying about. You'll need to assess your own situation before making the leap. But if you want it bad enough and you are willing to work for it, then the opportunity is there for you.